Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Better Minneapolis. Today I'm here with Cedric Frazier, who's running for Hennepin County Attorney. Hello.
Hey, Terry, thank you for having me here. Glad to be here today.
Yeah. So why don't we begin? You can just tell people a little bit about yourself who may not be familiar with your background.
Yeah, no, very good. As you stated, my name is Cedric Frazier, currently a state representative representing District 43A, which is the city of Crystal and New Hope. I've been serving as a legislator for 3 terms. This is my 3rd term, going on my 6th year. We start session February 17th, so coming up pretty soon. Before that, I served as a planning commissioner, City of New Hope, and on the city council for the City of New Hope as well. And professionally, I've been started my career as a criminal defense attorney in the Hennepin County Public Defender's Office. Moved on from there to mainly focus in the education area. I was director of investigating Title VII and Title IX complaints for Minneapolis Public School District, and then I ended my time there in the General Counsel's office as Assistant General Counsel, working on various legal matters from that perch. And now currently I've been with Education Minnesota for nearly a decade as a labor attorney, working with our 80-some thousand members and educators all across the state.
So even going back a little further, and I don't know exactly why, but people love to know where you're born and where. So where are you from? And yeah. I know the answer,
You
but
know the answer, yeah.
So
yeah.
Where were you born? What brought you here?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think because folks should want to know that foundationally, where your lived experiences and your perspectives come from. I was born in Illinois. Born and raised in the city of Chicago, grew up on the south side in a community known as Inglewood. If you know that, if you look that community up, you can see that community, it's a poor, blue-collar, working-class community. Plenty of issues in those communities with poverty, with violence, drugs, crime. I grew up in the 80s, left in the 90s when I left to come to college here in the state of Minnesota. Went to undergrad, University of Minnesota Morris, for any Cougars out there. Go Cougs. And then I went on to grad school in city of Mankato, Minnesota State Mankato. And then I went to law school at William Mitchell in St. Paul.
Great. Okay. And so what is motivating you to run right now?
I think about in this moment, I couldn't think of a better role to be in, considering what we're seeing in this moment. What we're seeing right now, we've got federal agents occupying our state, really punishing people for exercising their First Amendment rights, violating Fourth Amendment rights by illegal search and seizures, barging into people's homes.
Yeah, that was a headline yesterday or today, right? Like some memo that they didn't publish has been found out, and they basically think they don't need a warrant.
Yeah, essentially we found this memo has now been provided, I believe, by a whistleblower, where the memo says essentially you don't need to have a warrant, a judicial warrant, which is required by law if you want to do a search or seizure of someone's home. You need a judicial warrant signed by a judge in order to go into those premises. And they're essentially saying that they have the ability that law, our Constitution, does not apply to the activities that they're taking here. I think that is absolutely incorrect. But now we know exactly why they've been doing the actions they're doing. They believe they have that power opposite of what the Constitution actually says.
So is it safe to say that you support Ellison and Moriarty in their current kind of battle with the federal government? Or?
Yeah, it started with with the killing of Renee Good and the FBI shutting our local folks out of the investigation process. And then from a high level official saying we see no reason to actually investigate this shooting of someone in broad daylight. That appears from the video not to have been a threat to the agent that did the shooting. So I for me, I think it was timely for A.G. Ellison and County Attorney Moriarty to come out and say we are going to collect evidence and preserve evidence as best we can, so that we can review this evidence and then take a look to determine whether or not what charges we could bring for accountability purposes. I think that was vitally important because we're not far removed from what the aftermath of what happened after George Floyd was murdered on the streets in broad daylight. I see the parallels there. My biggest concern was that if there wasn't any action taken by our local officials to say that we are actually going to give you, transparently tell you what path we're going to take to seek accountability in this situation, I think we would have had a repeat of what we saw after George Floyd was murdered, because many people, I think in that moment, they felt that there wasn't going to be accountability, and that was the reaction of that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, that there wasn't going to be accountability.
I mean, what strikes me as kind of crazy about the current situation is, like, even if you wanted to say that the good did put that officer in peril, you would still do an investigation.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Correct.
Regardless,
Correct.
So just to outright say no investigation is mind blowing.
No, and I think that the Attorney General and County Attorney Mayor Moriarty were very clear that they are not making any assumptions or prejudging what action they're gonna take. What they're saying is, we have to investigate. I mean, these systems exist for a reason, and if people don't trust that we have a system that will investigate when situations like this happen, then you're going to lose trust. And what I fear is that you're going to have vigilantism. You're going to have people saying we need to take matters into our own hand. We're going to do our own kind of get our own kind of justice here, and that will lead to lawlessness in the streets. That is why we have these systems in play. We are a country based on a rule of law. That means there's due process. That means we must do the investigation, and then we make our determinations based on the facts that we have from that.
So you mentioned public trust in there, and I think that's one of your kind of tenets as to why you're running. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about what do you think the current status is between the Hennepin County Attorney's Office and the public, and what do you see yourself doing to kind of improve that trust?
Well, I think that after George Floyd was murdered, and after the subsequent charging and trial and conviction, I think that went a long way for communities that have often felt like when situations like that happen to folks from their community, and particularly Black and brown communities, poor communities, that there wasn't going to be accountability. I think that went a long way in saying that this is a new era, that we are going to hold people accountable. No one's going to be above the law, and no one's going to be beneath the protections of the law. So I think that was vitally important, and I think the trend, we are still trending in that direction, but we have to continue that. You know, all of these things, what we often see is when we begin to have progress in a way that is going to create a system that works for everyone, that's a fair system and applied fairly for everyone, we tend to see a backlash. And I do think we're in this kind of backlash phase now, where you hear rhetoric that, we need to go back, we need to take public safety back, or we need to turn things back to the way they were. The question I always say, or the question I always pose to people that they should ask, for anyone that says that, is, where are we taking this system back to? And explain to me and describe to me when it was at a place where it worked for everyone and it was fair for everyone. Because you have to grapple with that and answer that question if you're saying we need to take it back somewhere. The reason we have had the situations we've had over the last decade and longer in the state of Minnesota, when you look at inequities and folks feeling like they couldn't trust that this system was designed to work for everyone, is because we have not had a system that has been fair and applied the law. And held everyone accountable and protected everyone. And I think those are always the very vital questions you must ask anyone when they're saying, we need to go back.
Yeah, and so you, I believe, were a public defender for a while?
That's right.
Right? Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, it seems like that would certainly shape some of your philosophy around the role, right? I mean, I liked how you described it, like, no one's below needing protection kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have... It is a real challenge right now, because those public defense is really designed to ensure that you have the constitutional right of representation when you are being charged or accused of any type of crime by the state, by the government. In this moment, we're seeing that being challenged very much by the federal government to if that due process actually really is going to be applied evenly to everyone. My role as a public defender, I had the opportunity. I was with folks, in their worst moments, in their worst times. But I never felt like those folks lacked humanity and that they didn't deserve the opportunity to have the best representation possible and to require the state to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. I held hands not only with the folks, defendants that were accused of things, but also I spoke with victims.
Yeah.
And I understood. I could see and understand the harm that was put upon them and them wanting to have accountability and justice for that. And I also understood at the same time, I understood that we are a country of rule of laws, due process is baked into our Constitution, and that you absolutely have the right to defend yourself and ensure that the state has the ability and goes about their way, the correct way, to prove that case up against you.
So one of the things you mentioned in there was kind of communicating with victims.
Yeah.
Is that, would you say that's one of your top priorities? What falls in your top 3 priorities if you're elected?
Communicating with victims, victim advocacy, making sure that we are providing resources to victims when they have been harmed. And this is Terry, this is very important because if you have victims that can trust that there's going to be resources there for them, one, to get them out of a very, maybe a dangerous situation, to remove them from that so that they can participate in the gathering of evidence, giving witnesses statements, and likely testifying if that case is going to go to trial, to prosecute and go to trial. Folks need to feel safe and know that they're going to be provided resources to feel safe as we're going through that process to hold the person accountable that has committed harm to them. I think there has been good work to move in a direction to resource more there. I want to continue that work. What folks need to know is that if you are a victim, we're going to work with you. We're going to hear your voice. We're going to hear your input and what you'd like to see the outcome of that case to be. And we're going to make sure that communication happens in a way that you're not blindsided and there's no surprises when the outcome actually gets to the point where we are either going before the judge with a plea to ask them to approve it, which, by the way, most cases end that way, or if we have to try that case, what we're going to be charging those individuals with and what we're going to be asking for in terms of sentencing once we get through the trial process. There should be no surprises to the victim. They should be keyed in and communicated with throughout that entire process, and I want to make sure that happens. But at the same time, there's also staff that are staffed up as victim advocates to work with those. I want to make sure staff are taken care of because they are dealing with a lot of secondary and vicarious trauma, right?
Absolutely.
And so we have to make sure that they have the ability to be taken care of, making sure we address their mental health issues, because they can't do that work effectively and efficiently and well if we're not taking care of staff as well. So I have a very, very strong commitment to the staff that are doing that work, and then also ensuring that we can have the resources to ensure that we can do it really well for the victims that are impacted.
Now, you had proposed an advisory committee, I think, for victim and survivor advisory council.
That's correct.
Is that part of what you're talking about? And one of the terms I've heard a lot about recently is restorative justice. Are these the same things, or is there a difference?
No, there's a difference. This Victim Survivors Advisory Board, that would be the mechanism we would use to make sure that we're having input from victims and survivors when we're determining what type of policies or practices we're going to use in our offices, and how we're going to engage and work with victims or survivors of crime that have been harmed. I think that's important because if we truly want to address and be effective, we have to hear from those that have actually been harmed and impacted, and they often have ideas and thoughts on what we can do, give input on what we are doing, but also inform us on things that we may be missing, we may have a blind spot to, and that we should be focusing on and putting resources toward. I don't believe that exists in this county or any other county. That is something that I think would be vital to making sure those voices are heard. Part of this whole campaign is making sure that we have all the stakeholders at the table and bringing as many voices as possible to ensure that everyone is being heard. And that also helps to build the trust within the system if folks know you're actually listening to them and they see you implement that in real time in the practices that you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, so priority 2, what would you say? Or, what are a couple of the other priorities?
Well, I think a big thing is going to be, we are going on the second year of this Trump administration, and so a big thing is going to be how do we continue to stand up, not as a legislator, obviously, for our state, but as a county attorney in that role. How are we standing up for our county in terms of resources that the feds may be trying to pull back that are helping our county to create a system that is making all of our communities safe or safer, but also any attacks that are being put upon our residents, and how can we defend and make sure we're ensuring that we're protecting our residents that way, because it goes beyond the courtroom. What I always tell folks, we prosecute cases in the courtroom, but it goes beyond the courtroom. We're trying to make sure that we're doing things in tandem with our justice partners, local elected officials within the community, to make sure we're doing our role to help protect our folks as well. So there will be a real emphasis on looking at what's happening and what's coming down from the federal government and administration that may have harmful impacts on our county, using our resources to push back on that, and then making sure we're connecting with our community members to see what they're hearing and how they're being impacted by that as well. And then a big thing is also working with our youth. I mentioned that I work with, I'm a labor attorney with our education union, so that means I spend a lot of time in school districts and connecting with young people. And I think it's vitally important that when we look at public safety from the perspective and the interactions with our young people, that we're doing things, one, to be preventative. So we're investing or partnering with organizations, community advocacy groups, working with our local elected officials, working with the state legislature to bring in resources, to create opportunities to put them in safe spaces where they can have activities and programming, and then resources to keep them on a positive track so they can have the best outcomes possible. But then when we have to have accountability, if we have to remove our young people from unsafe environments or harmful environments so that they don't harm themselves, or in situations where they're headed down a path that they may harm others, we want safe, secured places to provide services for them to get them on track. I think we haven't done a great job of that currently. I think we've closed the Hennepin County homeschool, which was a place that we could put folks, young people, if we're holding them accountable within this system. I believe there were great people working in those places. We've taken that away. We have to find places and replace those things that we don't have anymore. Over in Ramsey County, in the
So
state,
if I could jump in there. So the Hennepin County Homeschool, and I think the other places that, where youth were sent have closed down. Yeah. So are you talking about really advocating with state legislators to get them reopened, or do you have other alternatives that you would like to see? I mean, I know there's been a trend towards like community-based rehabilitation, stuff like that. So where do you kind of stand?
I like the community-based rehabilitation efforts, and what I want to tell people with that, that means that that's a part of the accountability process, because when you're using these types of venues or secured residences for our young people, you're taking them away from an environment that they're in now that may not be good for them, and it may be causing harm, and it may be putting them in situations where they're causing harm to people because they're reacting to that stimuli. We are putting them in secured places where we can do intensive resources to help get them on the right track. And I think about this from the perspective, as a legislator, we worked on getting resources to Ramsey County to do a pilot program where they're going to identify 5 locations within their county to do exactly that. Those are the kind of things that I'd be working with our county commissioners on, our local law enforcement partners, our advocates, mental health professionals, to design places that would do exactly that, secured facilities around the community. And it's important that we do them around the community, because I think we need to be strategic about how, if we're taking someone from an environment, they may still have attachments that could be helpful in helping along the process, like family members that could get to them, so they still have that connection to the community while they're in a secure place getting the resources that they need. We want to make it easy for them to still have that connection, because I think it helps with the process of them healing and getting the resources they need to put them in a better place so that they don't stay attached to our criminal justice system and do better when they get out. So strategically placing those would be very beneficial and critical to making sure that all works out.
So that sounds terrific. I wasn't aware of that pilot. I know, I see a lot of people concerned about what, like, repeat offenders, especially like someone stealing a car.
Yeah.
How do you disrupt that sort of cycle?
I think what I'm explaining is a way to do that. I mean, right now we're lacking tools to do that. I think we've got situations where we've got young people segregated in our jails because our jails are designed for adults. So we have them segregated and isolated, which is not good for their mental health. We're sending kids out of the community to locations where we can house them until we figure out what we can do. That's not helpful because then now they're detached from maybe a loving folks that are loving in our community that may not be the harm, but they can't get to them because they're away from that. So I think when you're intervening and you're holding young people accountable, and I don't have a problem with that because I think for us, we have to provide guardrails and structures, and I think young people respond to that very well. You provide expectations, they will live up to those expectations. I've seen that young people are resilient, they will meet those expectations if you provide those expectations for them. And this is what I believe this accountability is about. It's providing clear-cut expectations of what we expect from you and how you participate in society in a productive, in a safe and respectful way. And I think we can do that. And part of doing that is having places like the facilities I just described, like the pilot program in Ramsey County, having places like that to take our young people when we've determined that, what you're doing, you're continuing to do because you're not in a safe environment yourself. So you're doing things that are harmful to you and to others. We're going to remove you from that. We're going to get you the resources you need to make sure we can put you on the right positive track. And then with the hopes, and the data proves it out, when you do that for young folks, they then are on a positive track, and I think that's very important.
You mentioned prevention resources.
Yeah.
What does that look like? I know you spoke about group violence intervention.
Yeah.
So what sort of resources do you feel like are needed for prevention, and is the group violence intervention, if I'm saying that right?
No, you're saying it right. Yeah, no. Yeah.
Is that a key part of what the resources you think?
Group violence intervention or community violence intervention, CVI. These are not new things, so I want to say I'm not inventing something. This isn't an incredible idea. I wish it was, but it wasn't. I mean, this has been around for a long time. I think what we've lacked as a society is the fidelity of investing in these types of resources for an overall public safety program that can be beneficial. And we've seen it. We've seen the crime that has gone down across the country. Many of the mayors that you're hearing from, mayors or governors or local officials, what they're talking about that they've invested in is GVI or CVI. They've invested in these community-led organizations, nonprofits, or they've done programs through community centers, through school programming that really have focused on providing access and resources for our young people that have been lacking. When we saw the uptick in crime right after the pandemic, a lot of that was due in part because our young people had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
We closed all of our schools. We closed our community centers. There was no access to the Ys. Any of those programs that young people would typically go and hang out, exert some of that energy. I was young once. You were young once. We had energy, right? We had energy, and if we didn't have anywhere in a positive way to direct it, we could get into things. And so we saw a lot of that. A lot of the car thefts, right? I mean, these are young people out, nowhere to go. They're getting into very bad, negative things. And then we had to address that on the back end. And we all pay for it when we don't do something up front proactively to intervene and to try to proactively prevent those things from happening. So that's essentially what GVI is. You focus on those types of programming, those types of resources for our young people, or for even young adults, for community members, to where you put those things in place to give them access to, I mean, it could be job training, it could be educational programs, it could be sporting activities. I've worked with tons of these community groups, and they do various amounts of those things that they provide for young people and give access to them, and that helps keep those young people off the street getting into things that are negative. So that would be my focus, would be how do we continue to resource those things. A lot of the places you've seen like around the country, like Alabama is mentioned, Maryland is mentioned a lot. We're doing a lot of that work here too. A lot of those places were funding it with the money that came through the federal government for the COVID money that came in. What we saw though was they've now, under this new administration, they've cut back a lot of that funding. So one of my concerns is that we have to make sure we find ways, we're gonna have to do it locally here, how do we continue funding those programs, because that is really what was a big impact on our crime rates going down, and particularly things that we're using for our young people.
I wanna move on and talk a little bit about guns and gun violence, which
Yeah.
is people have a lot of strong
Yep.
opinions about that. And I know you worked on what is called the Extreme Risk Protection Order Law, which is
That's
a
correct.
red
That's
flag.
our red flag law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you just
Yeah.
maybe define what it
Yeah,
does?
so we passed this law. I carried this legislation. Now, it was over a decade in the making to get it done, and it's often hard when sometimes to pass anything dealing with gun safety. But we got it done in 2023, and essentially what it does is if you got a loved one, friend, if you identified someone that appears that they're going to commit harm to themselves or to others, you can report this to your local law enforcement, and then they can go and seek to file a petition to, and there's due process here. So you have to file this petition with the courts. The courts have to evaluate all of the evidence that you're providing with them. The individual gets a chance to refute that and challenge the allegations that they're unsafe. And if the court determines that they are, yes, unsafe and they will commit harm to themselves or others, then the court can provide an order to have weapons removed, those guns removed from their homes. And they hold them for a period of time, 6 months up to a year. And then you can petition to have it renewed if you believe that person is still going to be a harm to themselves or others. But the due process is baked into it, so it's not, they can't just say, unlike what ICE is saying, how they can just go into people's homes if they want to. Yeah, you
It's
can't
not
just,
that easy,
Yeah, it's not
yeah.
that easy. You can't just say we're going to take your guns away. You have to go through the courts and you have to prove that up, and then the petition is issued to remove those weapons from those folks. And when you look at the Star Tribune did a deep dive and they looked at every petition that was put forth. And we looked at hundreds of those petitions were granted. And when you look at some of the facts, I mean, some of the facts show that individuals were writing or threatening to go and do school shootings, do mass shootings. We've saved lives.
Yeah.
And so we know this law works. It's exactly the way it worked in other states. And it is something that it's a real tool to deal with some of the gun violence that we have here. It's not a panacea because we just have guns everywhere, but it is a real tool and that's part of the intervention process, a tool that we have to really kind of dig into this gun violence issue.
Well, after the Annunciation shooting, obviously there was talk of doing a special session to address gun violence.
Yeah.
It'll probably come up again, I'm guessing, this term. Is there anything that you would like to see, or?
Yeah. So I actually just wrote an op-ed for the Star Tribune, and I kind of talked about my background. So I mentioned before I grew up in the city of Chicago on the south side, in a community called Inglewood, and I lost one of my best friends when I was a senior in high school to gun violence. His name was Rashawn, and I could have got angry. I talked about the vigilantism and trying to get justice in the community, but I didn't go that way. I joined an organization called Hands Without Guns. We went around the city talking to other young people about the harm and the dangers of being around guns and using guns that you shouldn't be around, and just finding other ways to address issues if you have issues. And for me, in this moment, I think about we lost. My good friend, leader, former speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark, and her dog Gilbert, and we had John Hoffman and his wife Yvette shot. So we've had harm done by gun violence to elected officials, political violence in this state. We had the Annunciation shooting. I lost 2 cousins back home in Illinois to gun violence last year. I lost a dear friend within the last 5 years to domestic violence with gun violence. So this impacts all of us very personally. So we're going into the session, we're going to be talking about ways that we can try to prevent these things from happening within our community. We're looking at a ban on these military assault style weapons that are really just designed to create as much havoc and tragedy and mass killing as possible. That's what they're designed for. High capacity magazines obviously allows you to do more damage in a short period of time.
Which, I'm sorry, but it's like, it seems like with these, with the ice that are running around, they keep leaving. I don't understand that. You just you slip on the ice, you throw down a magazine, you just leave it. I don't know. It's crazy.
One, I mean, I think that's another example of you got these folks running around outside of the mission that they're supposed to have.
Yeah.
They're not used to being in these cold climates, so they're slipping all over the place, and they're leaving behind things that can be used in a very dangerous way, and it could be harmful to people.
Yeah.
Very much government overreach.
So you talk a bit about the fentanyl crisis on your website, and I think we all see that in our streets, and so I'm just curious what you feel are the root problem there, and how, as a Hennepin County attorney, you can address it at all.
Yeah. So one, I think and this again goes back to, which was a great question why you asked where'd you grow up and where you're from, because it does kind of it gives you a perspective, and it tells people where you're coming from. When I grew up, crack cocaine was the big drug that was infiltrating our community. So you had many people that became addicted to this drug, and they did many things out of character that they wouldn't have done when they were not addicted to this drug. I had family members that were totally different when they were on this drug versus how loving and caring and compassionate they were and thoughtful they were when they were not suffering from addiction. So for one, I don't want to treat the fentanyl use from folks that are addicted, I don't want to treat addiction as a crime. We want to find ways to give people resources to get them in a place to get out of the addiction so they can be a positive person in that community. But we want to go after the folks we do want to go after the drug dealers. We do want to go after the folks that are putting these harmful things into our communities. We want to find ways to go to the source if we can, to prevent it from being in the community. I'll work closely with the U.S. Attorney Office, our law enforcement partners, our Attorney General, if we can do civil lawsuits for manufacturers to find a way to do that. But we want to get at the root of how these drugs are getting into our community. And that would be the focus there. But absolutely, from the victim perspective, I look at the addiction part when people get addicted as more victims, and I don't want to treat that with a punitive way. I want to find a way to address that from a public safety, public health perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat related to, well, definitely related to gun violence as well, is that and I would say for drug addiction, like the mental health resources needed intervene before these things get out of control are just not there, really.
No,
I mean,
and the one thing I think I will bring to this role in a leader is the work that I've done along with my colleagues in the legislature around more resources for mental health. I carried a bill, I carried a bill for $71 million to be focused on violence intervention, community group intervention, and a portion of that was around mental health, getting resources for folks to deal with the mental health portions, also the drug addiction portions as well, embedded social workers with our law enforcement agencies. And the way that works is when you embed those social workers, they can then, when there are situations, they can then come out after things are deemed safe to communicate with people that may have been victims or dealing with addiction to say, here are all the resources that you can avail yourself of to help you get out of this addiction and onto a better path. And those are the kind of things I would still be advocating for, obviously from the county level with our county commissioners and how we allocate our budget, but definitely still at the Capitol with the relationships that I have, focusing on getting more resources into our communities to do that kind of work.
So one of the things I think that Mary Moriarty is known for, and not everyone agrees with, is sort of maybe unhealthy relationship with police, let's say. I think some people feel like she kind of has a vendetta against them. True or not, I feel like that's out there. But so I'm curious, just how you want to see this, the Hennepin County attorney work with the police, and in particular, I think I read that there's 39 different law agencies in Hennepin County.
That's right.
And so when I saw that, I was like, well, how on earth does someone in this role really build relationships with 39 different chiefs or whatever? So how do you plan to build those relationships, and what do you want to see when come out of those?
Well, I currently have a relationship with the Hennepin County Chiefs Association and just a broader association. So I was the vice chair of public safety in my role as a legislator.
Okay.
And I've served in the public safety committee on the public safety and finance committee for multiple terms as well as the judiciary committee as well. So I have these relationships that I already have from the work that I've done there. I know these folks on a first name basis. I have their phone numbers. I can reach out to them. I've been reaching out to them and talking with them frequently with all of everything that's going on now. But just also as part of this campaign, making sure that we have an open line of communication. They know that they're going to get the same person that they've had as a legislator. I'm very transparent. If I've got something that I'm working on, any policies or as a legislator, any bills that I'm drafting, I'm sharing that to get their feedback with that, so there'll never be a moment where they say there wasn't communication from Cedric or Representative Frazier or County Attorney Frazier. We may not agree all the time, but there will be the communication. We will talk through these things. I will explain thoroughly how it's going to work, why we're doing this, why I believe it's going to help public safety and make our community safer, and we'll have those conversations. I plan to do the same thing with the elected mayors, with the city council members, because I think that may be a missing piece. Is not only should you explain these things, and law enforcement should be clear about it, those elected officials need to also have an understanding, so when their constituents reach out, they can clearly explain and they can hear it directly from the county attorney, not playing the game of telephone and you're hearing things and you may lose some things in translation. Those relationships are very important. So I plan to maintain those relationships, lean into them. Look, the way the system works, and this came up with the killing of Renee Good. The county attorney office, we depend on those sworn officers to do these investigations, to bring us the evidence that we can bring these cases, to hold people accountable, and to bring that accountability for our communities and to create safer communities. We need to have good relationships there. Again, we don't have to agree all the time on everything, and we're not going to do that. That's just not humanly possible. So no one should expect that. But the communication, the relationship, the transparency, and the open line of dialogue, that always needs to be there so we can do this work together, because we are dependent on one another to get the work done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got to say, I mean, this particular office seems to attract a lot of attention and controversy. I mean, I think every attorney, Hennepin County attorney, has faced calls for resigning. Obviously, after Floyd, they had people in their yards. So what do you think in your background kind of prepares you for, because there will be some kind of controversy. Somebody's going to get shot that shouldn't have been shot. There's going to be questions about, whether or not your office should take the case, the Attorney General should take it. It's really amazing. It happens all the time. So what do you think gives you the backbone, the fortitude for handling those kind of tough situations?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to, the resilience that I built growing up and coming out of the city of Chicago, coming out of the community in Inglewood. I often tell people that statistically, I'm not supposed to be sitting here having this conversation with you right now. Statistically, I wasn't supposed to go to college. I wasn't supposed to go to grad school. I wasn't supposed to come out with a law degree and be a practicing attorney. Not supposed to be an elected official right now. It is that resilience that has got me here, the belief that I can do these things, and to know that I have people supporting me that want to see me be successful and help me along the way. That's what I'll be bringing to this office. That it is that resilience that will fortify me in those moments where there will be absolutely something's going to be controversial. Where there's going to be some violent crimes that happen. That again, we're not always going to agree on how we address those and how we handle those. But I will always lean into and fall back on the resilience that I've carried through my childhood, my young adulthood, my adulthood, and also being in the public eye and elected official for almost better over a decade. And being a lawyer, we're in an adversarial business, so you have to have some type of, you have to steel your spine and have some type of fortitude to constantly deal with that type of controversy and drama all the time. And I think I'm well suited to do that. I think I've carried legislation that has not always been deemed to be controversial, and I've carried that through. And working with people that don't agree, people that do agree. Sometimes people that often support you and are angry that you're doing something. but I know how to work through that. Relationships are important. Communication is always important. Being transparent about why you're making your decisions, how you're making that decision, and sharing it with the public, sharing it with the stakeholders. It goes a long way in getting the benefit of the doubt and getting some grace. And even if folks don't like it, they can say, at least we trust that they're doing it for the reason that they're saying they're doing it. There's not an ulterior motive, and we're gonna believe and trust that that's why they're doing this work.
Great. And I mean, you have some people supporting you already. You have,
Yeah.
it looks like some, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we've got endorsements by Attorney General Keith Ellison. I've known Attorney General for a long time before he was ever elected to anything. I knew him when he was a criminal defense attorney, so we go back a long way. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is supportive. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan is supportive. A host of legislators from around Hennepin County are supportive. These are folks that obviously, I mean, these are folks from more moderate, progressive, more moderate districts, and folks that are very supportive of the work I've done. And a lot of that, what I always tell people, that's from years of building relationships. It's not someone just falling behind because I'm from a particular political party. It is from them seeing me do the work, working with them. Everything I've described about the way I build relationships and communicate and be transparent, I have done that with these individuals, and they know that that's what I'm going to take with me to the county attorney's office. So I'm very humbled and proud that they're willing to put their name and support behind me and tell their neighbors and their friends that they're supporting me, and these are the reasons why they're supporting me.
Great. So I know there's a lot going on in the world right now. I think we covered a lot of good stuff here. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to bring up before we close out?
I think I just want to say, especially in this moment, just today we've seen that 3 folks have been arrested for exercising their First Amendment right. And I just want to say to Minnesotans, I've been very proud of how we've shown up in this moment, exercising our rights, understanding that we have these rights and you can't just trample upon them. Keep doing that. Keep doing it peacefully.
Yeah.
I think we're showing the rest of the country and quite frankly the world, this is how you respond to government overreach and harm being brought to your community that you did not ask for and that is not making you safe. And I'm going to keep standing here with the rest of my neighbors and my friends here in Minnesota, and I plan to do the exact same thing when I'm elected to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one.
Appreciate you.